It started with a phone call that should have been nothing. Sunday afternoon, game muted on the TV, rain tapping against the window. I was polishing my old tools in the garage, one of those quiet rituals that keep a man from thinking too much. Then the phone buzzed. Jason. My son. We hadn't spoken much lately. Ever since his promotion and their move to Dallas, every conversation felt like a conference call, short, polite, and empty. I wiped my hands on a rag and picked up. Hey, kiddo, I said. There was a pause. Hey, Dad. His voice had that tone, hesitant, soft, like he was walking me somewhere I wouldn't want to go. What's up? I asked. Everything's fine, he said. We might need a little help. I felt my chest tighten, the way it used to when I got a call from the bank back in '09. Help? He hesitated again, then a woman's voice came faintly through the speaker. Melissa. His wife. She never called me Dad, only George. Like we were business partners who didn't like the contract. Jason, she whispered. Just tell him. And he did. Dad, remember the restaurant deal I told you about? The one Melissa's brother started? Yeah. The wine bar. You said it was going well? It was. But he hit a rough patch, supplier issues, rent, whatever. We invested some of our savings. It's temporary. Jason. I know what you're thinking. But it's a solid idea. We just need to cover a short-term debt. $30,000. We'll pay it back by Christmas. The number hit like a hammer. 30? Dad. Jason, that's not a small favor. That's half my retirement fund. He sighed. It's not like that. It's family. And Melissa's she's been under a lot of stress. I thought maybe you could. Bail you out? I said flatly. He didn't answer. I looked around my garage, tools hanging neatly, the old truck under its tarp, the smell of oil and dust. Everything I owned I earned with calloused hands. I'd spent 40 years fixing other people's mistakes. I never thought I'd be asked to fix my son's. I'll think about it, I said, though I already knew the answer. Thanks, Dad, he said quickly, relief rushing into his voice. Melissa will really appreciate this. After the call, I stood there for a long time, listening to the rain hit the tin roof. The house felt smaller than usual, like the walls had moved closer. That night, I called Margaret, my ex-wife. Jason's mother. She picked up on the second ring. George, she said carefully. This is a surprise. Jason called. Wants 30 grand for some debt. You heard about it. She sighed. Melissa told me they were expanding. I thought he had it covered. Expansion's one thing. Debt's another. Don't be so hard on him, she said softly. He's just trying to build something. With my money? I snapped. Your money, his future, it's the same family, George. I laughed bitterly. You always did have a way of making bad math sound poetic. She didn't answer, and for a moment, I heard only her quiet breathing. Then she said, He respects you, you know. He just doesn't know how to ask without feeling small. That's the problem, I muttered. He's not small. He's 33. We said goodbye, polite as strangers, and I poured myself a bourbon. The glass clinked against the counter. I stared at the amber reflection, the same way I used to stare at headlights in the rain when I was still driving long hauls. Miles of nothing but your own thoughts, dangerous territory. A message blinked on my phone. From Melissa. We appreciate you helping, George. It means a lot to Jason, and to me. You're doing the right thing. The right thing. Something about that sentence gnawed at me. The tone, the assumption. Like I was already part of their plan. Like my choice didn't exist. I didn't reply. Instead, I scrolled through my bank app, saw the balance I'd built over years of early mornings and late nights. That money wasn't just numbers, it was time. Every dollar a day I'd traded away. And suddenly, for the first time, I wondered if my son understood that. By morning I had my answer. He called again, cheerful. Hey, Dad. Just checking if you sent the transfer. I set my coffee down. I haven't. And I'm not going to. Silence. Then, what do you mean? I mean I'm done fixing things that aren't mine to fix. You're a grown man, Jason. You want a business? Handle your business. There was a pause, then his voice hardened. That's selfish, Dad. That word hit harder than 30,000 ever could. Selfish? I repeated. You have the money. You just don't want to help. You're sitting on savings while your family struggles. My family isn't the one who signed a bad deal, I said quietly. Melissa's voice cut in from the background. I told you he wouldn't understand. Melissa, I said sharply. I understand perfectly. Then I hung up. For a long time, I stood by the window, watching the rain. The world outside looked clean. Mine didn't. It wasn't about the money anymore. It was about respect. And that's when something inside me shifted, quietly, like the first tremor before a storm. 3 days passed without a word. Then came the dinner invitation. Jason and Melissa want you to come by on Saturday, Margaret said on the phone. Her tone was careful, like handling glass. They said it's just a family get-together. After that last call? I asked. George, she sighed. Don't make it worse. Maybe they want to talk things out. Or talk me into something. I muttered. But I went. You don't ignore your own son, even when he treats you like a wallet with legs. Their house looked like something out of a real estate commercial. Bright porch lights, new car in the driveway, a lawn trimmed like military hair. I parked my old Ford at the curb and sat for a minute, watching my reflection in the windshield. I didn't recognize the man looking back, tired, cautious, holding on to the last bit of patience he had. Melissa opened the door before I knocked. George, she said too brightly. So glad you came. Her smile didn't reach her eyes. Inside, the table was set for 6. Margaret was already there, along with Jason's in-laws, people I barely knew. A roast, candles, wine, the whole show. Jason came out from the kitchen, wiping his hands. Dad! You made it. I said I would. Good, good. Let's eat. Been a while since we were all together, huh? He poured wine like a host on television. Everything felt rehearsed. Halfway through dinner, Melissa started her performance. You know, she said sweetly, we're lucky to have family we can depend on. Some people don't have that. Her mother nodded. Family's everything. When times get hard, you help each other. Jason stared at his plate, then looked up. That's true. Unless someone decides they're done helping. Margaret shifted in her seat. Jason. No, Mom, it's fine, he said quickly, eyes locked on me. I just think it's interesting how people can have everything and still call it mine, not yours. Melissa put her hand on his arm, pretending to calm him. Honey, don't. It's not worth it. But it was exactly what she wanted, the spark. Everyone went quiet. I set my fork down. If you've got something to say, I said, say it. Jason leaned back. Fine. My dad thinks we're beggars. That helping his own son would be fixing someone else's mistake. Jason. Margaret whispered. Please. Melissa cut in. He made us feel small, Margaret. Like we were irresponsible. But we were trying to build something. A business for our future. By borrowing from the past. I said sharply. My past. Melissa's father frowned. George, surely 30,000 isn't worth tearing the family apart. I laughed once, short and bitter. Depends which side is doing the tearing. Jason's voice rose. You always talk about responsibility, but where was that when I was a kid? You worked yourself into the ground and called it love. You were never there. The room tilted. Suddenly, this wasn't about money anymore, it was about rewriting history. I was putting food on your table, I said. That's where I was. You were putting distance between us. Margaret reached for his hand. Jason, stop. But he didn't. He'd been waiting years to spill this. You don't get to play hero now, Dad. You had your shot. Now, when we finally ask for help, you hide behind your pride. Melissa dabbed at her eyes, quiet and perfect for the audience. He called Jason irresponsible. In front of me. I've never felt so humiliated. The in-laws murmured their disapproval. I could feel judgment closing in like walls. George, Melissa's mother said softly, sometimes it's not about money. It's about compassion. I wanted to shout, to tell them how they'd planned this dinner, how the debt wasn't mine, how the words they were using weren't even theirs. But something in me went cold instead. Compassion, I said. That's a fine word. You know what it means to me? Not letting someone drown you while you're trying to pull them out. Silence. Jason's eyes hardened. So that's it. You're done being a father. Don't twist it. He pushed his chair back. You did that yourself. By the next morning, the story had already traveled. Margaret called, voice trembling. George. Melissa posted something on Facebook. I opened the app, something I rarely did, and there it was. Some people preach family values until it's their turn to help. Money changes nothing, it only shows who you really are. Hundreds of likes. Comments from neighbors, friends, even old coworkers. So sorry you're going through this, Melissa. Stay strong, Jason, some parents just don't get it. And then one from my sister. George always was stubborn. Hope you kids get through this. I sat at my kitchen table, reading the screen, hands shaking. They'd painted me as a villain. A miser. A heartless old man sitting on a pile of cash while his son begged. Calls came in, old friends asking, what happened? Neighbors offering sympathy I didn't ask for. I didn't answer any of them. That night, I drove past Jason's house. Through the window, I saw him holding his son, my grandson, while Melissa filmed a smiling family video. Perfect lighting, soft music, fake laughter. It wasn't real. But people believed it. I drove home with the window down, wind cold on my face. That's when I realized something. I wasn't angry anymore. Anger burns out. What came after was colder, a clarity I hadn't felt in years. If they wanted a story, I'd give them one. Just not the one they expected. That was the night I decided this wouldn't end with words. I stopped answering my phone. Not because I wanted to be mysterious, but because the ring had started to sound like an accusation. Days folded into each other. Neighbors waved with cautious smiles. People at church offered soft nods like bandaged hands. My son's posts kept appearing, framed photos, captions about family values, friends chiming in about how charity reveals character. I read them like somebody reading someone else's obituary. Margaret came by with a casserole one evening. She set it on the counter like it was a peace offering and left a note in her handwriting. We can work this out. Don't burn bridges, George. She left before I finished reading it. When I was a younger man, I'd have driven straight to Jason and knocked on that door until someone answered. Lately, I'd learned silence had its own force. There's a kind of pressure you can apply without raising your voice. You just stop participating in the lie. That night, I drove out to the bank. The fluorescent lights hummed above the teller windows. I told myself I was only there to see a banker, practical logistics, like moving a chess piece. But when I sat with a woman in a gray blazer who had been there since my accounts were numbers smaller than my mortgage, something old and careful stirred in me. You're not the first to come in with that look, she said when I told her why I'd come. Her name tag read Eileen. She made tea for retired customers and remembered their birthdays. She asked me if I wanted to set up a formal transfer, or maybe a temporary loan. No, I said. I want to see the statements. Old ones? All of them. From the last 2 years. She nodded like she'd been expecting the request. We'll pull them. Takes a day or so. I didn't sleep that night. I opened the kitchen drawer and took out a little envelope I kept folded in the back. Just in case. Money. I ran my thumb over the paper, not because I planned to spend it, but because it felt like holding a small, fierce truth. You accumulate a life in bits like that: receipts, cancelled checks, the smell of an old jacket. It's not dramatic. It's proof. The next morning I called James, a lawyer I'd once helped move boxes when he was a kid. He'd grown into a gray-bearded man with the same crooked smile. We met at a diner where the coffee was the kind that tasted like tire rubber and comfort. "You called yourself?" he asked, sliding into the booth like he'd always expected me to. "I need to know if I'm an idiot for doing nothing." I said it flat. No heat. No performance. James folded his napkin. "Depends what you do next. If they're lying and you can prove it, you don't want to sling mud in public. You need a proper, cold chronology. Facts. Dates. Witnesses. We can leverage the law without making you look like the town grump burning pictures." I told him everything: the calls, the dinner, the Facebook posts, the dinner room glances. He listened like a man hearing the first paragraph of a contract. "2 things," he said. 1. Document everything you can get your hands on. 2. Consider a private investigator. Don't underestimate the emotional angle, though. People rally to the warm story. We'll need irrefutable paper. He tapped the table with his knuckle. Also, don't respond publicly. Let them talk themselves into a corner. I left with an address and a name. Mac Private Investigations. That night I sat in my den and thought about all the times I'd let things slide, small insults, the polite betrayals. I thought about my father, a man who never told me he loved me but showed it by fixing the roof. There was a line you didn't cross with him. He'd never wasted trust. When Mac arrived 2 days later, he looked like someone who learned patience the hard way. A man with a beard and an honest cardigan, an old camera bag slung over his shoulder. "You George?" he asked, voice low. "That'd be me." I showed him the outline. I told him the names, the dates, the posts, the dinner. He didn't say much. He did the work he always did. He asked precise questions, marked dates, wrote them down like he was mapping the bones of a story. He asked for consent to follow paper trails, to call a few people who might remember small things. I signed the agreement without blinking. There's an odd comfort in hiring someone to look at truth with you. You outsource the rage. The first week was small victories. The bank called me and confirmed they could pull archived statements. James wrote a letter advising how to preserve evidence. Mac found a screenshot of an old post, a snapshot of Melissa and Jason eating at a restaurant 2 months after they posted that they were drowning in debt. It wasn't enough to win the world, but it was enough to make a knot begin to loosen. We began to build a chronology, dates starred and taped in a folder that had been turned into a map. June 5th, restaurant grand opening, social media posts. June 23rd, Melissa's "We're in trouble" text to Jason. June 29th, a Facebook video of Melissa shopping at a boutique. July 2nd, bank statement showing gift card purchases for an expensive store. The facts started to line up like soldiers. But evidence is only half the work. The other half is intention. I'd seen too many men confuse fury with courage. I wasn't going to be that man. If I met theatrics with theatrics, I'd only prove her original accusation, that I was petty. So I practiced my calm. I spoke to James about tone, how to present the binder so it read like a case file, not a sermon. I asked Mac to dig a little deeper, vendor invoices for the supposed supplier problems, a list of donations or payments the restaurant had made, a confirmation if the so-called short-term loan could reasonably have existed. On a Friday afternoon, Max sat across from me with a coffee and a single sheet of paper. "Look at this," he said, his voice the kind that makes you lean in. It was a bank confirmation, a transfer into the so-called troubled account, dated 2 weeks before Melissa's viral post. The amount was small, not the 30 grand, but it contradicted the narrative of despair. Then he slid over a series of receipts, one for a pricey dinner suit, another for a weekend getaway payment. They were all within the time they were claiming to be strapped. "Not everything lines up," Max said, "but enough to ask questions. Enough to get people's attention if you do it right. I closed my hand around the paper until my knuckles whitened. Do it right, I repeated. So I wrote the list of names we need as witnesses, places we need to check, and quietly called Eileen at the bank back to say, pulled 2 years' worth of statements, flagged. No rush. Just keep them safe. James sent the first draft of a preservation letter to Jason, not an accusation but a request. Preserve records, don't delete posts, don't destroy documents. It was a lubrication more than a threat. There's a strange revival that comes when you stop being a reactive man and become a man with a plan. A cold clarity settled in me, like a person who had traded emotional flares for a map. The map was not vengeance. It was exposure. That distinction was everything. At night I kept a small thing by the bedside, a folded drawing my grandson had made during a visit. He'd scribbled a son and written Papa in lopsided letters. I kept it because I couldn't imagine a life that made me choose between truth and that crooked handwriting. I did not want to punish him. I wanted him to know the truth about grown folks who bent stories into weapons. When the calendar turned, we had more than rumors. We had documents, a timeline, a man who'd stand and say what he knew. James advised we aim for a controlled setting, a place where witnesses would be present and the truth would hit like a stone dropped into a pond. Nothing theatrical. No shouting. Paper and time stamps. I told him I'd prefer it be somewhere quiet. The church hall, perhaps, after the potluck? Or Margaret's small garden party where friends from the neighborhood would be there. A crowd that would keep the story from dissolving into a family spat. James nodded. Keep it public, keep it calm. People will believe a measured man. That night I sat with the folder on my kitchen table and the bourbon untouched. I thought about the line between father and bank, between kindness and enabling. I thought about every night I'd come home tired and still fix dinner because that's what you do. I thought about how a lifetime of trying not to be a burden had been twisted into proof of selfishness. If they'd wanted a scene, I could have given them anger. Instead, I folded the paper carefully, slid it into the binder, and closed the latch. The decision had been made. The machinery of truth was set in motion. I would not give them the money they wanted, but I would give them something else, the unvarnished facts. I slept that night like a man who'd stopped pretending the world was simpler than it is. Dawn found me ready. The next move would be deliberate, surgical, not to punish, but to expose. The plan would not bring him home. It might not even fix what had been broken. But it would make their lie visible. That, more than anything, felt like returning a small piece of myself. When you plan something that's only meant to change how people see the truth, you learn to respect small things, dates, times, little signatures, the smell of paper. The preparation felt less like revenge and more like building a case for gravity. Mac worked like a man who'd spent his life collecting facts for other people's quiet vindications. He came to my house with a camera bag and a manila folder, and the way he moved made me feel like I'd hired someone to map the bones of a lie. Found something, he said, dropping into my kitchen chair like he belonged. He placed a receipt on the table. June 12th. Boutique downtown. $228. Credit card ending in 8439. He slid another one across. Hotel booking, 2 nights in July. Then a small stack of timestamps from social posts showing Melissa and Jason at places they'd claimed they couldn't afford. My chest tightened, not with triumph but with the slow, clean click of proof fitting. Where'd you get these? I asked. Sources, he said. Public. Paid. He tapped his temple. And some people like to overshare when they're trying to sell a struggle. It annoyed me, how easily people curated pity. The next 4 days blurred. I met Eileen at the bank. James sent a conservatory letter to Jason's email, a strange, formal way to ask someone to preserve the evidence of their own lies, and Mac kept bringing small, sharp items that together began to look like a map. At the diner one morning, James slid a list across the table. If you're going public, you won't want loose ends, he said. Witnesses who can corroborate, a neutral party who can testify to the timeline, and keep it simple. The simpler, the cleaner. People get lost in emotion. Facts are clear. I asked him about tone. Do I let them yell? Do I keep it friendly? I pictured Jason's hands slamming the table, Melissa's expression perfected for camera. No theatrics, James said. You're presenting a file. A binder. Think of it as a business meeting where the business is truth. You don't need to gloat. You need to be incontrovertible. We started building the binder like builders laying bricks. Mac came up with receipts. Eileen printed statements flagged with dates. James drafted a 2-page chronology. What they said / what the documents show. I went to the hardware store and bought a simple black binder, tabs, plastic sleeves. There was a kind of ritual in arranging it: bank statement, social posts, receipts, vendor invoices, witness notes. I wrote little headlines on sticky notes. June 5th, claim of being in trouble. June 12th, boutique purchase. June 29th, deposit seen in account. The binder became a machine that said, "You can't unsee this." We needed more than paper. James recommended a neutral witness, someone respected in the neighborhood who could vouch for the inconsistency of the public narrative. I thought of Pastor Alvarez, a steady man who ran the community pantry and knew when people were in real need. Not a crusader for me, just a man who noticed things. I went to him on a weekday, standing in his office that smelled faintly of coffee and old hymnals. "George. Good to see you." He looked older than I remembered, lines at the corners of his eyes like creased maps. "I need a favor," I said. I told him the bare facts. He listened without interruption, like a judge listening to the opening of a case. When I finished, his hands folded together. "If what you say is true, then truth should be clear," he said. "I don't want to be part of any drama. But I will look at what you have and, if asked, I'll say what I see." He didn't promise the world. He promised sobriety. It was enough. Mac found a former restaurant employee who'd left on bad terms and was willing to tell a quiet truth about supplier invoices and payment delays. He tracked down a vendor who confirmed Melissa had called about a celebratory catering order not long after the "We're drowning" posts. Each new piece didn't feel like an attack, it felt like finishing a sentence. At home, I prepared myself in small ways. I practiced saying the facts aloud in front of the mirror. June 12th, boutique purchase. July 3rd, deposit into their account. I practiced not letting my voice climb into the old thunder that had gotten me through 40-hour drives. Calm holds a different weight. People believe a man who doesn't need to prove anything. We set the date for a small community meeting James thought would be public enough to prevent spin. Margaret's garden party was the perfect cover: neighbors, friends from church, a few community volunteers. It would be obvious, and if they tried to cry, family spat, there would be people present to hear both sides. When I told Mac, his eyes narrowed in approval. "A garden party's good. People will remember who said what in that context." He made a list of people to invite discreetly: Pastor Alvarez, Eileen the banker, a woman from the vendor, and one of Jason's old high school coaches who still cared for the boy he'd been. We rehearsed logistics. James suggested arriving early and placing the binder on the table without fanfare. "Let them speak first," he advised. "Then when they're done, slide the binder across like you're offering paperwork in a bank." He pointed out that the less theatrical the movements, the more the room would interpret them as normal. People distrust drama. They trust procedure. On the morning of the gathering, the neighborhood smelled of cut grass and baking. Friends arrived with potato salad, lemon bars, polite smiles. Jason and Melissa were late, a deliberate move, perhaps. I saw their car pull up, the stroller with my grandson inside. They moved through the crowd wrapped in flattery like armor. For a moment I felt the old ache, the urge to stand up and shout everything, to shake every lie out of their mouths. But I'd learned patience. I'd learned that shouting makes people side with the loudest voice, not the truth. We ate, and there was laughter, small talk about the weather, about the church drive. Then someone, a neighbor, mentioned Melissa's post. "Saw that on Facebook," she said. made me sad for them. Melissa smiled, the practiced gratitude of a woman who'd prepared a narrative. It's been hard. We're just trying to get by. Jason nodded, the wounded son, voice low. Dad didn't understand. I felt the room tilt toward him. Eyes softened, someone reached for his hand. That was the moment James and I had rehearsed in my mind 100 times. I stood quietly and cleared my throat. The sound cut through chatter like a knife. People turned. I placed the binder on the picnic table and left it there, simple and plain, its black cover unadorned. George? Margaret asked, surprised. She was the one who'd left casseroles, whose handwriting was still looped and patient. Yes. I kept my hands folded. I didn't reach for the binder. I just looked at them. Folks, James said, stepping slightly behind me, we don't want this to be messy. We want to make sure everyone hears the same facts. I opened the binder and slid the first plastic sleeve forward. A receipt, clearly dated. Next, a screenshot from Melissa's own account. Then a bank statement with a flagged deposit. I read the lines the way a man reads a shopping list, not for drama, just for clarity. On June 12th, I said, voice steady, this receipt shows a purchase at X Boutique. On June 14th, this bank deposit is made into the account Jason mentioned as empty. On June 29th, this post shows a celebratory dinner. I let the facts stand in the air. No one shouted. Someone whispered, "Oh." Pastor Alvarez looked down, collecting the pieces like a man counting prayers. Jason's face moved through little twitches, surprise, anger, then the instant of recognition that had the depth of a bruise forming. You brought receipts, Melissa said tight. You're trying to shame us. Her voice had venom now, the familiar tool of turning evidence into cruelty. I brought the timeline, I said. People can look and decide. A woman from the vendor stepped forward, face pale. I can confirm the catering order, she said softly. I remember because it was a big order, and it needed to be scheduled 2 weeks out. Eileen the banker nodded. Statements were pulled at his request. The dates match. The room's air changed, not into hostility, but into consideration. When truth arrives slowly, it has time to sink in without splashing. People are given the chance to think rather than react. Jason's coach, a stocky man with a face like an open ledger, crossed his arms. You expecting me to side with you because you're my old boy? He said bluntly. Show me dates. Show me facts. We did. You could see the small shifting in the crowd as fact nudged prejudice off its perch. Melissa's shoulders sagged like someone deflating. Her smile was a mask that had nowhere to stick. When it was over, no one threw papers in the air, no one screamed. There was an unsettled quiet, the kind that follows a thunderclap. People lingered to ask questions, to reconcile rumors with receipts. Some offered hesitant apologies. Others were simply silent. I handed the binder to James. Keep a copy, I said. For now, that should be enough. It was enough to start the unraveling, but not enough to heal anything. I watched my son stand there, small under the weight of his own words. I watched him try to recover some dignity, but the patchwork of his story had begun to pull apart. That night, back in my kitchen, I folded the napkin from the party and set it in the binder under a tab labeled Witness Statements. The preparation wasn't glamorous. It was slow work, collecting, cataloging, setting the stage. The hard part was over. The harder part, execution, was next. I kept the drawing from my grandson in my pocket as I lay down. Whatever else happened, I wanted that crooked sun to be the horizon I left my heart on. The trap wasn't a trap for him so much as a clearing of fog. People would see. That, in itself, felt like a small, crucial victory. The following Saturday, the air over the neighborhood carried that faint sweetness lawns have after a morning rain. The garden looked ordinary. Paper plates, folding tables, laughter still echoing from the week before, but everything underneath was different. A week of silence had worked on the rumor like rust on metal. People had started to wonder which version of the story would hold. I came early. James was already there, sleeves rolled, calm the way only lawyers and surgeons are calm before blood. The binder sat on the table between the lemonade pitchers. He'd made 3 copies, one for them, one for me, one for record. Simple, he said. You don't argue. You show. Then you walk. I nodded. No speeches. Right. Let silence do the work. Pastor Alvarez arrived next, then Eileen with a manila envelope she wouldn't let out of her hand. She gave me a small, reassuring nod. She'd seen enough fathers empty savings for kids who never looked back. People drifted in, neighbors, friends, Margaret in a summer hat. No one knew they were about to watch something break in real time. Then the Lexus pulled up. Jason stepped out in pressed jeans, Melissa behind him, perfect hair, perfect smile. The baby stayed with the sitter this time, clean optics, fewer witnesses to rawness. They walked straight toward me. Melissa's voice came bright. Dad, can we talk? Privately? No, I said. This time everyone hears the same thing. Jason's jaw twitched. We didn't come for a scene. Good, I said. Neither did I. James gestured to the table. We'll be brief. People nearby grew quiet the way crowds do when they sensed the air changing. Margaret stepped closer, her hands folded like she was praying for a peace that wasn't coming. Jason spoke first, rehearsed. Look, my father and I had a misunderstanding. He's upset we asked for help. We've sorted it. Sorted? I said. You told people I refused to help my family. You called me selfish. That's not a misunderstanding. A ripple through the guests, small gasps, polite discomfort. Melissa's hand tightened on his arm. Dad, please, Jason said under his breath. Not here. I opened the binder. Pages shone faintly in the sun. June 12th. I said evenly. Boutique purchase, $228. June 14th, deposit into your joint account. June 29th, dinner bill for $500 at Latelier. July 2nd, your posts. Sometimes pride costs more than debt. All within 3 weeks of the call where you said you had nothing. Melissa's voice sharpened. That's stalking, George. You can't dig through our lives. Public records. Screenshots you posted yourself. James set the second binder down before them. Verified by bank statements and vendor confirmations. We're presenting them so everyone understands the facts. Jason's color drained. Why would you, Dad? You didn't have to go this far. You made it public, I said. I'm just correcting the record. Pastor Alvarez spoke softly to the group. I've reviewed these dates. They matched the documentation I received. The crowd shifted again, weight moving away from them toward me, though I didn't want it. I'd hoped for clarity, not victory. Melissa tried a last swing. He's twisting it. We did invest money. We just... James interrupted, calm. Ma'am, the supplier invoice you filed with your LLC shows payment received. No outstanding debt. Do you wish to dispute the signature? She froze. Jason looked around for rescue, but none came. The same neighbors who'd liked his posts were now looking anywhere but his face. Margaret reached for her son's arm. He pulled away. You wanted honesty? He said to me, voice cracking. Fine. I was desperate. I thought you'd help if you saw us as struggling. You've always needed someone to save. I needed a son who didn't lie to me. I said. The words landed without edge, just wait. He swallowed hard. You win. There's no winning here, I said quietly. There's only truth. The conversation dissolved into murmurs. Melissa's father approached, red-faced. I had no idea, he began, but James stepped between us. It's done, he said. Jason turned to Margaret. Mom, please, you believe me. She shook her head. I believe you need to start over. Her voice trembled, but it didn't break. They left together, not speaking. Melissa kept her head down, phone clutched like a weapon without bullets. The binder stayed on the table, open to the page with the receipts. People lingered only a moment before pretending nothing had happened, but the quiet that followed wasn't ordinary. It was the sound of reputations resetting. Pastor Alvarez put a hand on my shoulder. "Truth has a way of taking root," he said. "Give it time." By dusk the party had thinned. I helped fold tables, grateful for something manual to do. Margaret walked beside me carrying paper plates. "I didn't want it to come to this," she said. "Neither did I," I answered. "But lies are like mold, you either scrub them out or they spread." She studied me for a long second. "Do you think he'll forgive you?" "I didn't ask for forgiveness." That night, home alone, I set the binder on my kitchen counter. The lamplight hit the plastic sleeves and made them shine like thin sheets of ice. My phone buzzed once, Jason's name, a single text. "I'm sorry, Dad." No explanation. No defense. Just those 3 words. I read them twice and didn't reply. Some apologies need to stay hanging in the air before they mean anything. I poured a bourbon, but only sipped once. It tasted different, less bitter, more like the first breath after rain. 2 days later, Melissa's post vanished from Facebook. Another appeared instead. Sometimes the truth hurts before it heals. We're taking time to rebuild. No tags. No photos. Just silence underneath. People in town stopped whispering when I passed. Some nodded, some avoided eye contact. Eileen called to tell me she'd archived all documents in case they tried another stunt. Max sent a brief text, "Job done." I walked to the porch that evening, the same spot where the first phone call had come. The rain had started again, soft this time. The wind smelled of cut grass and iron. Inside, the binder sat closed. I'd keep it a while, not as a trophy but as a reminder that truth, once proven, doesn't need to shout. It just needs to exist. When I finally went to bed, I took the folded drawing from the nightstand, my grandson's sun, crooked and bright, and taped it to the fridge. Whatever came next, he'd know his grandfather hadn't disappeared into shame. Revenge, people say, is sweet. They're wrong. It's quiet. It tastes like air after thunder, clean, strange, a little empty. But it's honest. And for the first time in a long while, that was enough. The days that followed felt too calm, like the eye of a storm that had already passed and taken the noise with it. There were no more calls, no more posts, no more dinners to ruin. Just silence, the kind that makes you hear your own heartbeat when the refrigerator stops humming. I thought victory would feel lighter. It didn't. It felt like standing in a house after everyone's gone, the furniture still warm from where people used to sit. Morning light came through the kitchen blinds, cutting soft lines across the binder still sitting on the counter. I hadn't opened it since the garden party. Didn't need to. The truth didn't require daily proof. I poured coffee instead of bourbon, a small rebellion against old habits. Eileen called once, said the bank was closing the file. "Everything looks settled," she said. Her voice carried that mixture of kindness and relief people reserve for stories that ended better than expected. "Thank you," I said. "Don't thank me, George. You just finally let people see what was already there." When the call ended, I sat a long time, staring at the mug in my hands. Steam rose and vanished, like everything does if you wait long enough. Jason didn't reach out again for 2 weeks. I told myself it didn't matter, but lies have a smell when they're too fresh. Then, one evening, the doorbell rang. He stood there, not polished this time, sleeves rolled, eyes tired. No camera, no Melissa. Just him. "Can I come in?" he asked. I hesitated, then stepped aside. "Kitchen's the same as you left it." He looked around like the place was a museum of old arguments. "You haven't changed a thing." "I tried to. Never quite took." He nodded, rubbing his palms together. "She's gone. Took the kid for a few days to her parents. Says she needs space." "I'm sorry," I said quietly. "For him." He smiled weakly. "You'd like him. He's loud like you were." We sat. I waited. He spoke first. You were right about the money. About everything. I thought if people pitied us, it'd make me feel like a provider again. I just didn't want to look like I'd failed. You didn't fail, Jason, I said. You lied. That's different. Lies rot slower than failure. He winced but didn't argue. I'm gonna pay you back, Dad. Every dollar. I already sold the watch, and… Stop, I said. I don't want it. The money was never the point. He looked at me then, not like a son looking at a father, but like a man looking at another man he'd finally stopped blaming. I don't know how to fix this, he said. You don't, I said. You just start from where you are and do the next right thing. That's how I built everything in my life, one right thing after another. He nodded slowly. Can I bring the boy next time? I looked at him for a long moment, then nodded. He has my eyes. Might as well let him see what kind of trouble they come with. He laughed once, a short, honest sound, and left without shaking my hand. I didn't mind. Some bridges don't need fanfare to start rebuilding, they just need weight on the first plank. Margaret called the next day. I heard he came by, she said. He did. You talk? We said enough. I'm proud of you, you know. You didn't lose yourself in all that anger. I smiled, though she couldn't see it. Age teaches you that silence lasts longer than shouting. She sighed softly. Maybe we were both too loud for too long. Maybe, I said. But we did one thing right. We raised a man who's learning, even if it took him 30 years and a public disaster. She laughed, a warm, tired sound. That's parenting for you. A lifetime subscription to lessons you didn't sign up for. When she hung up, I realized I wasn't angry at her either. The whole house felt lighter, like forgiveness had opened a window somewhere. The following Sunday, I went to church for the first time in months. People looked up when I walked in. Some smiled, some nodded, a few avoided my gaze. Shame doesn't always belong to the guilty. Pastor Alvarez paused mid-sermon when he saw me. Afterward, he walked over, shaking my hand with both of his. How's your heart? He asked. Loud, but steady. He chuckled. That's a good rhythm to end on. He didn't bring up the binder or the party or the fallout. He didn't need to. Truth doesn't need retelling when it's already done its work. That afternoon, Jason texted a photo, my grandson, sitting at the kitchen table with a crayon, tongue poking out in concentration. Below it, he's drawing Grandpa's truck. I stared at it until the screen dimmed. Then I printed it, taped it next to the first drawing, the sun. The two looked good together. Imperfect. Honest. I stepped outside onto the porch where this whole story had started, and watched the clouds roll by. The air smelled like wet cedar and cut grass. Sometimes you don't need to rebuild everything you lost. Sometimes it's enough to stand in the wreckage and realize you're still here. People think revenge is about punishment. It isn't. It's about balance. About restoring the weight that someone else knocked out of your hands. When you get it right, there's no joy in it, only quiet. And quiet, I've learned, is its own kind of peace. The binder stayed in the drawer. I'd never open it again. Let the paper yellow, let the ink fade. The lesson had already burned itself into something deeper than proof. One evening, I found myself standing in front of the mirror, trimming my beard. For the first time in months, I didn't see the man who'd been called selfish. I saw the man who stopped pretending love meant surrender. I turned off the light, went to the porch, and sat down with the bourbon untouched beside me. The night was cool. Somewhere in the distance, a child's laugh drifted through the dark, maybe my grandson's, maybe just the world reminding me it goes on. And for the first time in a long time, I let myself believe that maybe I would too. Fade out. If this story moved you, please support the channel by liking the video, subscribing, and leaving a comment with your thoughts. To continue the journey, click the box on the left for the next story. Thank you for being here.